On a dark Tuesday night, the streets of Milfield were almost empty. But for Olivia Turner, a young black public defender, silence was never safety. She had spent years standing up for those who had no voice, carrying the weight of her father's name, a detective who died branded as corrupt. Tonight, as the red and blue lights filled her rearview mirror, she felt history repeating itself. Most people think injustice begins with a bang, with a gunshot, with a headline. But sometimes it begins quietly, with a smile that hides a threat, with a hand slipping a bag into the back of your car. What Olivia carried that night wasn't fear. It was something far more dangerous to a system built on lies, the truth. It was a Tuesday night in Milfield, a town that had long carried the scars of division. The rain came down hard, tapping against windshields, running down the cracked sidewalks, and blurring the old neon signs that lit up the east side. Olivia Turner drove her worn-out Honda Civic carefully through the storm, her hands steady on the wheel even as her heart wrestled with tomorrow's cases. She was 34 years old, a black public defender who had spent the better part of a decade standing in cramped courtrooms where poor defendants rarely walked away free. For her, justice was never an abstract idea. It was a daily fight, a promise she carried not only for her clients but also for the memory of her father. Thomas Turner had been a detective, a proud black man who believed in the badge until the badge turned against him. Accused of corruption and found with drugs in his locker, his career ended in disgrace, and weeks later, so did his life. Officially, it was ruled a suicide. Unofficially, Olivia never believed it. She had seen too many cases, too many lives destroyed in the same familiar pattern. Stop a black man or woman, plant the evidence, tell a story that made them guilty before the trial even began. Her father had been investigating Captain Frank Reed when he died, and that shadow never left her mind. Tonight, she tried not to think about him, but the storm outside seemed to carry his voice back into her car. "Don't ever stop looking for the truth, Liv," she could almost hear him say. The red and blue lights that suddenly flooded her rearview mirror snapped her back into the present. Olivia's stomach knotted. This was not random. She slowed her car and pulled over, wiping the condensation from her windshield, and saw through the rain what she had feared. Captain Reed himself, stepping out of the patrol car. His silhouette was tall, deliberate, every step a performance of authority. He didn't need backup for a broken taillight, yet she saw a second cruiser roll up quietly behind him, lights off. Another figure, Officer Daniels, slipped out, hovering near the trunk of her car. This was a setup, and Olivia knew it in her bones. Reed approached with his flashlight, shining the beam directly into her face. "License and registration, Miss Turner," he said smoothly, the practiced courtesy barely hiding the disdain in his tone. She handed the documents over, her voice calm. "What's the reason for the stop, Captain?" "Tail lights out. Dangerous in this weather," he replied, though she knew her lights had worked perfectly when she left the office. His eyes scanned her car, not for violations but for opportunities. "Step out of the vehicle, please." Olivia took a deep breath. She had taught her clients never to resist, never to give the officers any excuse. She followed her own advice, stepping into the downpour. Rain soaked through her blazer, clinging to her skin. Reed stood close, blocking her line of sight to Daniels, who had now moved toward the trunk. "I'm going to search your vehicle," Reed said, his tone making clear it wasn't a request. "You don't have probable cause," Olivia answered, drawing on her years of courtroom discipline. "I do not consent to a search." Reed's smirk deepened, the same smirk she remembered from her father's funeral. "I detected the odor of marijuana when you rolled down your window. That gives me probable cause." It was a lie as old as the streets of Milfield, a lie often used against people who looked like her. Olivia's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "There is no marijuana in my car, and you know it." Across the street, the glow of a phone illuminated a face in a darkened storefront. Someone was watching, recording, but Olivia couldn't tell who. The rain masked every sound except the hammering of her pulse. Behind her, Daniels popped open the trunk. She strained to see past Reed, but his body blocked her view. Daniels slipped a hand into his jacket, and she caught a glimpse of the plastic glint before it vanished under the lining of her trunk. A bag. "White powder. 3 kilos, she would soon hear them say. Olivia's voice rose above the storm. "This is a setup. I know what you're doing." For a moment, one of the officers, Rodriguez, hesitated. Their eyes met, and shame flickered across his face. But then Reed lifted the bag, holding it high like a trophy. "Would you care to explain this, Miss Turner? 3 kilos of cocaine in your trunk? That's a serious problem." "That is not mine," Olivia shouted, her voice breaking with fury and fear. "You planted that." Reed shook his head with performative disappointment, his words heavy with racial undertones. "What a shame. A public defender, a woman entrusted to uphold the law, caught dealing on the streets." Daniels grabbed her wrists roughly, snapping cold handcuffs around them. The metal bit into her skin as he pushed her against the car. "Olivia Turner, you're under arrest for possession with intent to distribute." The humiliation burned through her chest. She thought of her clients, mostly poor, mostly black, who would see her mugshot tomorrow and believe she had betrayed them. She thought of her father, branded corrupt without a trial. And she thought of Milfield itself, where the system had been built to break people like her. As the patrol car door slammed behind her, Olivia felt the weight of the storm press in. But under the fear, under the rising panic, there was something else resolve. She had known this day might come. For months, she had prepared for it. Hidden files, secret recordings, encrypted backups. Reed thought he was ending her career tonight, but in truth, he had just walked into her case. And as the car pulled away into the rain, Olivia whispered to herself, "This is not the end. This is where it begins." That whisper, though quiet, carried the force of generations who had fought before her. The fight against injustice wasn't just personal anymore, it was ancestral, systemic, and burning with a truth Reed could never silence. And that truth would be the fire leading us into the next chapter of her story. Milfield was not just a town, it was a wound that refused to heal. Its factories once roared with steel and iron, but now most stood silent, their windows shattered, their walls tagged with graffiti. Behind those empty brick shells, memories lingered, memories of unions broken, neighborhoods divided, and a justice system that had always tilted against its black citizens. Olivia Turner had grown up in this town, and she had seen firsthand how its streets swallowed people whole. Her father, Detective Thomas Turner, had once believed Milfield could be different. He wore his badge with pride, not because it gave him power, but because he thought it gave him purpose. To him, justice was not a slogan, but a duty. He coached Little League, volunteered at the community center, and often told Olivia and her sister Maya that the badge should be a shield, never a weapon. But that shield had turned against him. 8 years earlier, Reed, already climbing the ranks, stood over Thomas's desk with a folder in his hand and a smirk on his face. Drugs were found in Thomas's locker, files vanished overnight, and suddenly the detective with an unblemished record became a suspect. Colleagues avoided him. Reporters painted him as the corrupt black cop. And when he died, the town whispered that he had taken the coward's way out. Only Olivia never believed it. She had been there the night of the funeral, dressed in black, watching Captain Reed offer his condolences. His hand on her shoulder, his breath close to her ear, whispering words that still cut like glass. "Your father chose the easy way out. Smart man." From that day forward, Olivia knew her path. She would not wear the badge, but she would stand in courtrooms, defending those who had no chance otherwise. Every guilty plea she fought against, every client who swore the evidence had been planted, every black teenager pulled from a traffic stop for no reason, it all echoed her father's story. Milfield's courthouse became her battleground, but its walls were stacked against her. Judges like Howard Grant rolled their eyes when she argued too hard. Prosecutors like Wilson cut deals with officers, sealing cases before they even began. And behind them all, Captain Reed ran his department like a king in his castle, untouchable, celebrated for reducing crime, while his men terrorized the very community they claimed to protect. Olivia knew Reed hated her presence in those courtrooms. Each time she walked in with files under her arm, each time she challenged the evidence his officers brought forward, it was like her father's ghost had returned to haunt him. That's why Reed chose this night. He didn't just want to end her career, he wanted to erase her father's legacy once and for all. As Olivia sat in the back of the cruiser, her wrists cuffed, the rain pelting against the glass, she thought about her clients. Marcus Johnson, a community organizer who had led peaceful protests, was framed last year and locked away. Elena Martinez, a schoolteacher who had dared to file a complaint after her brother was beaten by officers, was suddenly found with drugs in her car. Every name, every story, lined up like dominoes. Tonight, she had been added to the row, and yet she felt a strange calm settle in her chest. They thought they were silencing her, but in truth, they had given her story the power to burn brighter. When morning came, Milfield's local paper plastered her booking photo on the front page. Public defender arrested on drug charges. Her tired eyes, wet hair, and orange jumpsuit told the world what Reed wanted it to see. Another black figure of authority brought low. But beyond the headlines, whispers spread. In the county jail, inmates recognized her. One young woman approached in the common area, eyes wide. "They did the same thing to my brother last year," she whispered. "Said they found meth in his car. He's still locked up." Olivia nodded slowly. It was confirmation of what she had always suspected. The pattern wasn't random. It was calculated. That night, in her cell, her new roommate, Tasha, told her everything. She was a nurse who had once reported a teenager beaten half to death by police. Weeks later, Reed himself had pulled her over. Drugs appeared in her trunk, and she was thrown into the system like the rest. "They only do this to us," Tasha said bitterly. "Black, brown, poor, anyone who dares to raise a voice." Olivia sat in the dark, staring at the cracked ceiling, her resolve hardening. "Then we'll raise it louder," she whispered. For the first time since her arrest, she smiled not because she was free, but because she realized Reed had underestimated her. The rain had tried to wash the night away, but it had only revealed the stains beneath. Sunday morning came with a chill that bit through the air. Milfield's courthouse, with its marble steps and iron railings, looked dignified from the outside, but inside it was a machine that processed lives like paperwork. Olivia was led into courtroom 3, wrists and ankles shackled. The gallery was filled, reporters scribbling notes, former clients watching with disbelief, and in the front row, her sister Maya with her notebook open. Maya Turner wasn't just a journalist. She was a witness to everything Olivia had stood for. Her eyes met her sister's, and in that silent glance, an entire lifetime of love and determination passed between them. Judge Howard Grant entered, his robe hiding the golf tan he proudly wore every weekend at Reed's Country Club. He barely looked at Olivia before setting bail at $1 million, an impossible sum designed not to protect the public, but to break her spirit. Her attorney, an old colleague, argued that the amount was excessive. The prosecutor countered with icy precision. A public defender caught with 3 kilos of cocaine represents a unique betrayal of trust. Reed sat in the back, his uniform immaculate, nodding solemnly for the cameras. The room gasped, but Olivia did not flinch. She knew this was a theater, and in the theater, timing was everything. Back at the public defender's office, Maya began her own quiet investigation. She walked past sealed boxes of Olivia's files, evidence tape stretched across her sister's desk. A detective lingered in the hallway, his eyes darting nervously. She recognized him, Detective Harris, a veteran who had been close to her father. That night, Maya found herself at their late father's cabin, spreading old files across the wooden table. Sarah Parker, her friend and former FBI forensic accountant, joined her. Together with Alex Rodriguez, a tech-savvy ally from college, they began piecing together a puzzle Olivia had been building for months. Clearwater Holdings. The name appeared again and again in Thomas's notes. Officially, it was a company that imported furniture. In reality, it was a shelled duffel bags filled with cocaine confiscated from real busts were being funneled through its warehouses, redistributed into the streets, and profits laundered into offshore accounts. Reed's signature was everywhere, hidden but undeniable. Maya's hands trembled as she flipped through the evidence. This was bigger than Olivia, bigger than her father. It was an empire, and it had been built on the backs of people of color who had been silenced, framed, or buried in the system. That night, Alex hacked into a security feed. Grainy footage showed Reed and his men arriving at Warehouse Unit 17 with duffel bags, leaving 30 minutes later with envelopes. "Payoffs," Sarah whispered. But footage alone wouldn't be enough. It was illegally obtained, and Reed had allies everywhere. They needed a pattern, witnesses, and above all, timing. Olivia's trial had been fast-tracked for Monday. Reed's biggest shipment was scheduled for Sunday night. The 2 clocks were ticking down together, and only one would decide who controlled the narrative. Meanwhile, in her cell, Olivia played her own hand. During the visitation, Maya slipped her a coded message through their lawyer. "Check Dad's fishing box." Olivia smiled faintly. The old tackle box still held secrets, and she had one more card to play. The vintage watch on her wrist, confiscated during booking. No one knew it contained a hidden micro SD card filled with 6 months of recordings, photos, and files, proof that Reed's operation was rotten to its core. Reed thought Olivia was just another black voice he could silence, just another headline he could manipulate. But every move he made had only tightened the trap she had been building. And as the storm clouds gathered once again over Milfield, the city prepared to watch its masks ripped away. Olivia closed her eyes that night, shackled but unbroken. "They've built their system on lies," she whispered. "And tomorrow, I'll show them what truth can do." The jail was supposed to be a place of punishment, but for Olivia, it became a classroom. In the cold, concrete halls, between the clang of metal doors and the shuffle of guarded footsteps, she began to see the larger picture unfold. Every woman she met had a story that mirrored her own. Black, Latina, working class. Each of them spoke of sudden traffic stops, suspicious evidence, plea deals forced under threat of longer sentences, and always, somewhere in the story, Captain Reed's name appeared like a shadow. At night, when the lights went out and the silence settled, Olivia and Tasha whispered across their bunks. Tasha's voice trembled with anger as she recalled the night Reed pulled her over. "I'd just left the hospital. I filed a report about that boy 16 years old, beaten so bad I thought he'd die. 2 weeks later, Reed's smiling face was in my rearview mirror, said he smelled marijuana. Next thing I know, I'm here." Her eyes glistened in the darkness. "They don't even care if it makes sense. It just has to stick long enough to ruin you." Olivia listened, every detail burning into her mind. This wasn't random. It was a strategy. The system didn't just fail people of color, it was weaponized against them. And the cruelest part was the silence. Judges looked the other way. Prosecutors pretended to believe. Reporters printed the headlines. The silence of those in power became the loudest voice of all. Meanwhile, on the outside, Maya dug deeper. She traced 7 cases over the past 3 years, all minorities, all tied to Reed's officers. She found arrest records that matched dates when Reed deposited large sums into an offshore account. She saw a pattern. Whenever someone challenged the department, filed a complaint, exposed a beating, questioned an arrest, they ended up behind bars with drugs that mysteriously appeared. It was not just corruption, it was a deliberate system of racial suppression. In the county courthouse, Reed stood in front of cameras, presenting himself as the guardian of Milfield. "It's always troubling when someone entrusted with the law betrays that trust," he said of Olivia's arrest. His words dripped with hypocrisy, and the crowd nodded along. He was white, polished, respected. She was black, exhausted, and already judged. And that difference was the crack in the system where injustice thrived. Olivia knew she had to turn silence into sound. Each night, she whispered to Tasha, "We will not be quiet." And Tasha, broken but not defeated, began to believe. For the first time in years, Olivia felt the weight of her father's fight on her shoulders. She wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was standing for all of them. The silence that had shielded Reed for years was beginning to fracture, and when silence breaks, the sound can shake the walls of an empire. Sunday afternoon, Maya walked into a quiet diner on Milfield's west side. A man sat in the back booth, his police badge hidden in his jacket pocket. Detective Harris looked older than she remembered, his face worn by years of compromise. He gestured for her to sit, his hands trembling slightly around his coffee cup. "I should have spoken years ago," he said. "When your father was framed, I stayed silent because I was 3 years away from a pension. Now I see what silence has cost." He slid a small notebook across the table. Inside were names, dates, and case numbers. Each one is tied to Reed's operation. Maya's eyes widened. It was confirmation, not just suspicion. That same evening, Officer James Foster visited Olivia in jail under the guise of a security assessment. Foster was white, mid-30s, and recently transferred from Chicago PD. He leaned close as the guards pretended not to hear. "Internal Affairs in Chicago sent me. There's a federal investigation building. Reed's arrest accelerated things, but we need you to hold on. We need evidence only you can provide." Olivia studied him, suspicious but hopeful. Foster's eyes held steady. "I know what Reed did to your father, and I know what he's doing now. You're not alone in this." For the first time, Olivia saw cracks in Reed's fortress. A detective ready to betray him, an officer working quietly with the feds, a sister fighting like fire outside the walls. The allies were scattered, fragile, but real. And together, they could form something Reed never expected: resistance. But Reed was not idle. That night, he called Maya directly, intercepting her outside the newsroom. His voice was smooth but heavy with threat. "Your sister is facing 20 years, but if you stop digging, convince her to plead, maybe we can make it 5. Do you really want her to die in prison?" His smile vanished as his tone sharpened. "Accidents happen inside, especially to women like her." Maya held his gaze, refusing to flinch. "You can threaten me, Captain, but you can't threaten the truth." Her words shook, but her resolve was steel. Back in her cell, Olivia felt the pressure closing in. Tasha whispered, "They're watching you closer. They're scared." Olivia smiled faintly. "Good. Fear means they know their time is running out." She lay back on her bunk, hearing the rain outside the barred window, and thought of her father. He had been silenced, but his fight lived on in her. The unlikely allies were gathering. The storm was building, and Reed, for the first time in years, could feel the ground shifting beneath his polished shoes. By Sunday evening, the cabin was alive with whispered urgency. Maya spread Thomas's old files across the wooden table, Sarah Parker flipping through financial records, Alex Rodriguez typing furiously into his laptop. On the screen, grainy footage from Warehouse Unit 17 played, Reed and his officers unloading duffel bags, leaving with envelopes. Alex froze the frame. "That's Lieutenant Phillips, head of Internal Affairs." Sarah swore under her breath. "If IA is dirty, no wonder every investigation vanished." Clearwater Holdings. The name was everywhere. Property deeds, shipping manifests, offshore accounts. On paper, they imported furniture. In reality, they laundered cocaine seized from actual busts, repackaging it into a network Reed controlled. It wasn't just corruption, it was empire building, using the authority of the badge to create a criminal business shielded by law. Maya's heart pounded as she connected the dots. "This is federal RICO, organized crime, and my sister is sitting in jail, framed by the very man running it." Sarah nodded. "We have evidence, but it won't hold unless we tie Reed directly to the drugs." Alex looked up from his screen. "Tomorrow night, 11 p.m., another shipment. 5 million worth. Harris says he'll wear a wire. Foster is in place, but we have one shot." Back in jail, Olivia was pulled aside by her lawyer. Hidden in the paperwork he passed was a note from Maya. "Check Dad's fishing box. Clearwater. We have allies." Olivia's eyes softened with pride. Her sister had taken up the fight. She whispered back, "The watch. It has everything." She knew Reed didn't realize her father's gift was more than a keepsake. It was the key to his downfall. That night, as the lights dimmed in the cell block, Olivia closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. Not for herself, but for the truth. For Tasha, for the women around her, for her father's memory. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a shift. For years, Reed had worn the mask of authority, the polished smile, the celebrated leader. But masks crack, and when they do, the face beneath is uglier than anyone imagined. Clearwater was his empire. Tomorrow, it could become his cage. Sunday night in Milfield was unnaturally still. The storm that had raged earlier in the week had passed, leaving behind damp streets and a heavy, waiting silence. In the cabin by the forest, Maya and her small team worked as if time itself was breathing down their necks. On the table, Alex's laptop showed a digital clock, 9:15 p.m. 2 hours and 45 minutes until Reed's scheduled shipment. Less than 12 hours until Olivia's trial. The tension was suffocating. Sarah Parker, calm but stern, sorted through financial records, cross-referencing shipping manifests against deposit logs. "Every shipment lines up," she muttered. "Each arrest, each planted case, it all ties to a payday." Maya paced the room, her fists clenched. "And if we don't stop him tonight, Olivia's conviction will lock it all away. He'll be untouchable." Meanwhile, in her cell, Olivia prepared herself. She wasn't thinking about the courtroom anymore. She was thinking about survival. Reed had arranged to transfer her to the state prison at 6 a.m., a move that broke every protocol. Tasha had whispered to her during lunch, "Once you're in state, he can do whatever he wants. People disappear there." Olivia had nodded, her expression calm, though inside her pulse thundered. But she had one weapon Reed didn't know about, her father's watch. The micro SD card hidden in the band contained months of evidence, and if Maya could retrieve it, the trap would finally spring shut. At 10:30 p.m., Detective Harris sat alone in his car outside Warehouse Unit 17, his palms sweating. The wire under his shirt felt like a bomb strapped to his chest. He thought of his pension, his children, his years of silence. Then he thought of Thomas Turner, a man who had once been his partner, a man who died for daring to stand up to Reed. Harris whispered to himself, "Not this time." Inside the cabin, Alex readied the drone. "Infrared, 4-hour flight time. We'll see everything." Sarah checked her notes. Maya stared at her phone, waiting for Foster's signal. At 11:02, it came. "They're here." The game had begun. Earlier that evening, while waiting for the clock to strike, Maya had retraced Olivia's arrest. She stopped at the gas station across from the intersection. The clerk recognized her instantly. "You're the reporter, right? The one whose sister they locked up?" Maya nodded, her voice trembling. "Did you see what happened that night?" The clerk hesitated, glancing toward the street. "The manager told the police our camera was broken, but it wasn't. I kept a backup." He slid a USB drive across the counter, his hands shaking. "If they know I gave this to you, I could lose my job. Worse." End of. Maya returned to the cabin, plugged the drive into Alex's laptop, and the screen lit up with a grainy but undeniable truth. The footage showed Daniels at Olivia's trunk, pulling a bag from his jacket, slipping it under the lining, clear as daylight. No excuses, no technicalities. This was the moment Reed's empire cracked. As the drone hovered over the warehouse later that night, Maya thought of that footage. She imagined playing it in front of the court, the press, the nation. She imagined every black man and woman who had been told their word meant less than an officer's badge. This footage was their vindication. But they still needed more. They needed to tie Reed directly to Clearwater. At 11:17 p.m., the drone's camera caught movement. Reed's cruiser pulled into the lot, followed by Daniels and 2 other officers. Harris adjusted his wire nervously, stepping out of his car. "Evening, Captain," he said, trying to steady his voice. Reed clapped him on the back, smiling that polished smile. "Good man, Harris, loyal man." Inside the warehouse, duffel bags exchanged hands. Envelopes passed from Reed to his men. Money, drugs, betrayal, all caught on tape. Back at the cabin, Alex whispered, "We've got him. We've got everything." Sarah nodded, her jaw tight. "Now we just have to survive until morning." Monday morning, 5:30 a.m., Olivia sat on the edge of her bunk, her wrists already shackled. Reed himself arrived to oversee her transfer, flanked by Daniels and another officer. He wore his authority like armor, but Olivia saw the cracks beneath. "Eager for your trial, counselor?" he asked with a smirk. Olivia's gaze was steady, just eager for the truth to come out. Reed leaned close, his voice a whisper of venom. "You think you're clever, but by tonight, you'll be forgotten. State prison is a dangerous place for women like you." Olivia met his eyes. "You killed my father, and you think you silenced him, but you didn't. Every step you took, every lie you told, it's all recorded." For the first time, Reed's smile faltered. He dismissed the officers with a sharp gesture, leaving them alone. His voice dropped to a snarl. "Bluffing won't save you." Olivia lifted her chin. "This isn't a bluff. This is checkmate." The door opened, and in walked her attorney Price, Sarah Parker, and Assistant U.S. Attorney Davis. Behind them, Foster entered with 2 federal agents, weapons drawn. Davis's voice was firm. "Captain Frank Reed, this is a federal warrant for your arrest on charges of narcotics distribution, evidence tampering, and conspiracy under the RICO statute." Reed lunged for his weapon, but Foster was faster. "Don't," he barked, his gun already leveled. The cuffs that once bound Olivia now clicked around Reed's wrists. His face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this," he spat. Olivia stood, her chains rattling, and lifted her father's watch in front of him. "My father recorded you. I recorded you. And now the world will see you for who you are." Outside, reporters swarmed as Reed and his men were led away in chains. The footage from the warehouse, the gas station, the financial records all played across national networks. The hero of Milfield was exposed as its greatest criminal. For the first time in years, Olivia breathed freely. 6 months later, Milfield looked different. The police department now operates under federal oversight. Body cameras became mandatory. Civilian review boards investigated complaints, and applications from minority officers tripled. The old guard had fallen. Reed sat in federal prison, awaiting trial on charges that would keep him there for life. Judge Grant had resigned. District Attorney Wilson faced disbarment, and every case tied to Reed's operation was reopened. 7 innocent people walked free, their records cleared. Among them was Tasha Williams, who now worked as outreach coordinator for a new initiative born from Olivia's fight. On a crisp autumn morning, Olivia stood at a podium in the newly renovated Milfield Community Center. Behind her, a plaque read, "The Thomas Turner Justice Initiative." She spoke with quiet strength. "Today, we honor those who were silenced. We honor those who fought and those who lost. Justice is not a gift. It is a responsibility, and no one should face the system alone." The crowd rose in applause, tears shining in their eyes. After the ceremony, Olivia walked to the cemetery. She knelt at her father's grave, where a new headstone bore the truth. Detective Thomas Turner died in the line of duty. She placed the watch beside the flowers. "We finished what you started, Dad," she whispered. "Your name is cleared. Your fight lives on." Foster stood nearby, now interim captain, watching respectfully. "Your father would be proud," he said simply. Olivia looked at him, her expression calm but resolute. "There's still work to do. One corrupt system exposed doesn't fix the others." She straightened, her gaze steady on the horizon. "But it's a start." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from Maya. "New whistleblower from the county sheriff's office. Another Reed situation brewing." Olivia smiled faintly. Justice, she realized, was not a destination. It was a journey, and she was ready to walk it step by step, case by case, never silent again. The rain that once drowned her fear now washed the streets clean. The silence that once buried her father's truth had been shattered forever. And in its place rose a voice, unyielding, carrying a message the world could no longer ignore. Justice always finds a way. And so, Olivia's fight in Milfield reminds us of something timeless. Injustice can be powerful, but truth has a way of breaking through. Her story is not just about one woman or one town, it's about every voice that refuses to be silenced. Justice isn't a moment, it's a journey. If this story moved you, if it reminded you why we must keep standing up against racism and corruption, then please take a moment to support our channel. Hit the like button so more people can discover these stories. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter in our journey together. And most of all, share this story with someone who needs to hear that hope is still alive, even in the darkest nights. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for walking this path of truth with us. Until next time, stay strong, stay aware, and never forget, justice always finds a way,